Go. The meeting is being recorded and started. So welcome to our community call and Ask Me Anything session. This week we're going to focus on radical inclusion, which I personally have no idea what it is about. But Adam and Jorin mentioned it the other day, and it was interesting. I want to learn more. And I was thinking that like my initial ideas was like including all kinds of people that might be radical, but I have no idea what it is in detail. So, Adam and Jorin, please enlighten us so we can like learn more about it.
Yeah, so I think of it as kind of like a way of being and a way of communicating, that you try to withhold judgment and be open to lots of different points of view. And how does that tie into BrightID? Well, we feel like there's so much good waiting to be unlocked that it's being held back because of the inability to prove your uniqueness. So all kinds of like decision-making tools, all kinds of ways to share community wealth or global wealth. I mean, really, this world belongs to all of us. So we should be finding more ways to share that. And that's what it means to me in the context of BrightID. Now I want to hear Jordan's answer.
Philip is, I think,
And
talking. I'm not
Philip's
sure if
answer.
he's talking to
Oh,
us or
I'm muted. Can we enable the chat so people can
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
participate?
please enable chat.
Yeah, we just asked people to participate without enabling the chat, so they should
We
do
got
it.
to, if we want radical inclusion, you got to enable the chat.
There you go.
We,
Like,
That's
we,
right.
were,
it's so symbolic of like what we're doing and talking about.
we were
Okay.
we were optimizing only for sign language. You had to turn on your camera and sign language what you wanted to say to us. Okay, so radical inclusion for me, I think is it's like a value that we can instill into the community from the very onset, and that allows us to really like rethink about how we interact with each other, and on like a actionable level, it's like going outside of going out of your way to really try to bridge the gap between disparate groups of people. And when you instill that into community from the very get-go, I feel like it allows the community to grow in such a way that is very different from how I find communities grow traditionally, where typically you have like a kind of like binding thing that you center around, whether it be it could be a sports team or something like that, but going outside of that and really trying to find where we are different and understanding each other's perspectives, I think is a very important piece in growing a larger, more robust kind of community, especially as we start to talk about DAOs in a more real way, and as we see more and more DAOs start to come about, the way they're going to be effective is if they become radically inclusive and make them accessible to as many people as possible. And I think that it's kind of a mercurial kind of way of describing it, but I think in a sentence, it's going out of your way to connect with other people and find common ground. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When you say it like that, it makes sense to me. So let's talk more about what this means for BrightID. like why that's so important to BrightID. And I will say that one of the things that I want to be continually reminded of when we're working on BrightID is that, you know, who is being excluded. Obviously, we want Sybils to be excluded, but that's about it. Like, if you're like, that's really what the bar should be. If you're, you know, if and it's easy to like think about the people that we like and the people that we want to get the stuff that we're getting and to get the benefits that we're getting, but you know, sometimes we have to go outside of that group of people that we feel like naturally aligned to and be like, you know what, this, you know, even the people that I don't understand or maybe don't feel aligned to, they get this stuff too. Like we're not excluding them. And so like some of the things I worry about in BrightID are, what about people who don't have mobile phones? What about people who, you know, maybe hold unpopular views or something like that? Are people going to use the BrightID labeling abilities or connecting abilities to like smash those people down and say like, you know what, you have like, I don't like your views, and so you don't get to like receive this UBI or you know, participate in this vote or whatever, because I just don't like you. Or even, I mean, you could even go more extreme than that, and maybe someone has done something that is like objectionable, like that you know, that most people would find objectionable. Is you know, how do we make sure that BrightID is not like used as a punishment platform to, you know, in place of like a justice system where it's like, okay, you broke the law, so no more UBI for you or something like that, or no more voting for you. So yeah, these are areas where we need to be constantly aware of that we're not excluding people for the wrong reasons. To me, like the reason to get excluded is you're a Sybil. Like this is a duplicate account, you get excluded. That's what BrightID is about. If other people have ideas of like why someone should be excluded, please tell me, and let's discuss it. I think this is a good place to discuss that, or a good time to discuss it.
Yeah, is there like any reason, like this is how I'm rephrasing the question, like is there any reason for banning anyone from BrightID, even if they are acting against the nature of BrightID, even if they are trying to create extra accounts for themselves? Is there any reason to remove their like unique account, one of their accounts? Like I understand excluding people from like our community platforms, like on Telegram, on Discord. There might be reasons for that.
Yeah.
But like disabling someone's unique account because we figured out that there are other accounts belonging to the same person, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
Like,
a really good question, like that I've thought about a lot, is who are the enforcers, who are the adjudicators? Obviously, a lot of the adjudication happens with the BrightID network, with the network analysis. The analysis says, I mean, if the analysis says that you can't be verified, then you can't be verified for a certain application if the application is choosing to use that analysis. And that's just the way it goes. And in some cases, it does exclude some real people who, for whatever reason, can't get through. Like I was just talking with Kyle from Gitcoin, and because the way they have it set up, and we talked a little bit about how we might be able to resolve this, but because they have it set up how they have it set up, it's possible to make kind of like a weird mistake, but still an honest mistake, and then lose out on being able to be verified on Gitcoin. Like there's some ways to do that. And maybe we can fix those, but so I guess there's different levels. One is the graph analysis, I think, and then after that it goes to the application that chooses which graph analysis to use. An application can have other reasons for excluding people, like Paslar, you hinted at, like a Discord server. If someone's being unruly, they violate the rules, so they get banned. That, and then you can use BrightID to actually enforce that ban. So that's a possibility. But as far as like being able to use BrightID, who makes the judgment call besides the node operators, and who enforces it? If so, let's say that there's a certain application that requires you to have a very strong connection level, and that strong connection level means that you have to find some people who have a long history with you. So let's say close family members, relatives, these types of connections. And let's say that for some reason, those people decide to turn against you. Or let's say that they turn, that, the world effectively turns against your family. Let's say that your family is like ostracized now in some way. Is it appropriate for, and how do we, if it's not appropriate, how do we stop that from happening? How do we stop like, let's say that your family, for whatever reason, the neighborhood now doesn't like them anymore, and people that maybe helped you get verified in your BrightID, that had made connections to you, suddenly they say, we don't like you anymore, let's unmake those connections. And then there's also what you said, Paslar, which is maybe your crime was actually against BrightID itself. Maybe you like tricked BrightID, and people found out about it. They found out that you tricked them. They found out that, hey, you connected to me with one of your Sybil accounts and you were tricking me. And so obviously I'm gonna report that Sybil account. But does that mean that I now become an enforcer, that I make sure that you never get verified with BrightID again? Like I block you. I tell all my friends to block you. No one makes connections to you. Now you can never like even receive one share of UBI or something like that, because everybody's blocking you now. Is that too harsh of a punishment? So anyways, that's kind of like a brain dump of a lot of different thoughts.
Like in the point of a BrightID star or a normal user, and this has happened when someone comes to a connection party or makes a connection to some person, and then you realize that, oh, I've met this person before, and this is a person who is already using another BrightID account, trying to create another one for himself. And he's already verified, and he's making a connection to me, and this one is verified too, for normal users at least. Then you don't know which one of these you should consider this person's unique account. So what you do naturally is you report all those, because you don't know which one is the Sybil one, which one should be considered the real one. This would be one of the reasons someone would get like the unverified for all the accounts, because you don't know which one to report. So this would be one of the situations where someone gets kind of the unverified. I wouldn't say banned, but at least unverified on all the accounts that he has. If like one of us figures out that, oh, I know this person is in control of this other account too, so which one should I report? I report naturally both of them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And this is kind of like this would be my personal approach, especially when we're talking about already known connections, not just met connection. Like this is someone that you already know to some extent. If someone came to me, so let's say that I suspected someone was making Sybils and I reported some of their accounts. If they come to me later and they say, hey, I admit it, I made a bad choice and I was trying to see if I could get some Sybil accounts but I've decided to be honest now. Personally, I would give them the benefit of the doubt, and because I think for the things that we want BrightID to be in the future and enable in the future, it's too harsh of a punishment to block someone permanently from BrightID from all their accounts. So obviously, I would still keep the reported status on all of their accounts but one. If they told me like, this is my real one, please, I'm sorry, please re-verify me on my one real account, then I would do so. So I think that's like, to my feeling, that has to be the way that we treat each other for this to work, because it's like, imagine that BrightID is being used for a universal basic income, and this is like a core part of just like being a part of society and being able to exist and support yourself. And you don't want to cut someone off from that because of like past actions, especially if there's some way for them to redeem themselves. I think in almost all cases, there's got to be some way for them to redeem themselves.
Yeah, to kind of continue what you were saying a little bit earlier too, Adam, like I think like on a protocol level, BrightID wants to be radically inclusive. And I'm trying to find an analogy for it. And I think the closest thing I'm thinking about is the internet. The internet is this, in most areas of the world, a public good, and it's free and open for anybody to access and use, provided they have, the device to use it. It's like there's no real restrictions there. However, if you want to access a particular website on the internet, you need to have credentials, you need to be approved, you need to create an account in many cases. And so the restrictions, the enforcers are the applications that are using it. So as a platform, as a protocol, we want to try and make it as accessible to everybody, i.e. what you were saying about thinking about people that don't have a cell phone, or like how can we make it as accessible and ubiquitous for anybody to access, and then we leave the use cases up to the applications to kind of say what people they want to allow into the community. Because I could think of like, maybe I want to create a local crypto group, and I only want people that we actually have met in real life, and we meet up, maybe, COVID restrictions aside, we meet up once a month, and only those people should have access to whatever communication channels we have. I think that's totally fine. And finding an algorithm that uses the BrightID graph in order to enforce this is a potential use case. But then you might want something that is completely open to anyone from around the world. And Sybil resistance is still super important in that. And so you can also use BrightID for that. So the scope and range of how you can use BrightID is very wide. And so we want it to be radically inclusive. Anybody can use it, but then give the flexibility to applications to make decisions based on their use case and how they want to implement BrightID for their purposes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love that you're thinking about inclusion on a protocol level. I think that's awesome. I think that's the starting point, but definitely not the ending point.
I was talking to Jorin on the side, and like we were discussing, is there any group of people that we should kind of exclude from BrightID or not have them verified on BrightID. And I'm wondering, like, do you guys think that a very young kid, like a 2-year-old kid that doesn't understand an identity, doesn't understand the use of BrightID, do you think it's ethical to enable their parents to like create an account for them and register for different applications on their behalf, because we know this baby is not using that application, but the parents are? Yeah, that's something that is like I'm thinking about right now. This is a topic like, is it ethical to enable really old people that wouldn't use the technology, wouldn't use the BrightID themselves, to get verified on BrightID, and so that their like grandchildren or their children start using BrightID on their behalf, because that's actually what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think on a protocol level, that's not really for BrightID to kind of determine. I think about like my grandparents opening up a bank account for me and putting money in it when I was a kid. I think that's totally usable, and like the bank's not going to be like, well, the child's 2 years old, he doesn't even know what a bank is. Like they just want to set some money aside for me, and like a lot of the apps that are currently using BrightID have some sort of incentive, incremental incentive, or a faucet or something like that, a way to earn some value. And I think again, it's on the application to decide how they want to approach that issue. If they can like identify accounts that are accessing from the same IP address or whatever, and then they can have a way to ask a question like prove that you're using this only for you, or prove who you are using it for. I think that's on the application to kind of decide, and BrightID just provides the tools to make that thing possible.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think that fits in with radical inclusion. And if an app says, "Hey, it's only appropriate for 18 plus to use this," or whatever they decide, BrightID does not deal with those types of restrictions. Like, we don't provide that kind of credential. The credential that we provide is this a unique human being? And then we leave it to other solutions to provide credentials like, okay, prove to me that you're over 18. And how you do that, yeah, I mean, there's ways to do that. You could use a BrightID like solution to do that, but then you'd have to be, if you start adding too much of that together into, like if you try to integrate too much of that directly into the core of BrightID, then you start, I guess, kind of, I don't know. To me, it's like, I don't know if I can't say that we will never, provide social proofs of things like age, but that's definitely not our initial focus. So for now, we would have to leave that to more traditional methods of like proving your age or something like that an app might want to do.
I would like to talk about what Adam said before. First of all, I want to say that the banishment is no the it mean is the ultimate punishment for someone, but could be another levels of punishment like probatory time, or maybe a vital pulse that the people have to do for a time. A year you need to log in some page and prove that you are yourself in a page. I mean, like so other kind of punishment, not only banishment forever. So that's something to think about. And about the UBI that Adam said, I don't know is it for my career, but every step I make in my life, I every time I think about the legal system, because I am studying laws. So when Adam talked about the UBI, that's a thing that is really big and is really impactful in the society. and have to be a really value for the society. So when you talk about that, but doesn't name the legal system, because every country has his own legal system, and the UBI cannot be apart from that. Okay, and from what Joren said, that is most like BrightID is most like internet. The internet is regulated by the legal system in every country. So is the perfect analogy for what I am trying to say. It's something that you cannot miss up. And I am like feeling something inside me because you guys never mentioned anything about it, and it's in my career. So it's the only thing I want to say. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much, Victor. Something that I wonder about is, Poslar asked, would there ever be a reason to where we just have to exclude someone from BrightID? Something that like used to keep me awake at night is thinking about scenarios where like a part of the world is just so corrupt that if you try to give someone a UBI or you try to give someone a BrightID in that part of the world, that it will just be confiscated. Basically, you can imagine these people as enslaved by some regime or something that says, okay, you all have BrightIDs, great. They're all going to be appropriated by the dictator, and the dictator is going to use your, like, please come into, we will, if you don't come in and turn your BrightID over to the government, then you'll be locked in prison or something like that. And so everyone is required to, like, it's against the law to keep a BrightID, and if you have one, you have to turn it over to the government, and the government's just going to use it to collect UBI and not give it to you. So something like that, like that's like really extreme, but then there's different levels approaching that where it's like, okay, there's kind of like scary middlemen. Like you look in some countries, if you want to have access to money, maybe you have to go through these loan shark type people who charge excessive interest, but maybe that's your only option to even have money. And so it could be something like that with BrightID. It's like, okay, well, if we're the mob, and if we catch you having a BrightID, like, you have to give us some. And so we look at it and we say, well, maybe we should just, not have BrightID in that country. But at the same time, like, how do you, so if you let's say you have a policy that says, okay, just for safety reasons, and just because the corruption is so bad, please don't connect to anyone from Syria or something like that. I don't know. To me, that doesn't feel like it's being inclusive, but at the same time, it's like, how do you stop this? Is there a way that we can fight this corruption? Is there a way that, like, is it better to, from BrightID's standpoint, to have like certain exclusions like that, just to, like, I don't know, cut off some of these maybe like corrupt or terrorist organizations or something like that from having more power. So what do you guys
Adam,
think?
when I've heard you sort of say similar things in the past, what I've thought of is if like part of the information that you could give in a connection was like, do you believe this person like has, control over their BrightID, or are they free? I don't know that like quite the right word, but that could be part of it. It's like, I wouldn't want it to be like geographical. It's really about the person's specific instance.
That's a good
like
idea.
what is their situation? Because you could also you could also imagine a situation where there's a woman who and her children who are being sort of held captive by her husband, and he just steals it all from her. And an application might want to know, like, right, is the thing that I'm giving being given to a free person or not? So I don't know all how that works, but
That's yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think that really is the deciding factor, much more than geographical. Yeah, and so I hope that I mean, I hope that that's a consideration that we take, that we make when we're making BrightID connections. Like, is this a free person? Is this a unique person? Is this a free person? If it's not a free person, then I'm not really connecting to that person. I'm really just feeding into like that person's captor or whatever. So yeah, thank you for saying that.
yeah, and I wonder if, we've talked a little bit about Aura in this call, that like, sort of systems like Aura built on top of BrightID might be a better place to have that more granular information, because like I'm not sure that belongs in the public social graph. Like, right now I can traverse the public graph and see what everybody says about everyone else. I may not know exactly who all the dots are, but I can see, and I can imagine that being problematic information if it was completely public. So I'm not sure, but something to think about as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation. So if you imagine some of these connections, it's like, yeah, I mean, I think if I personally knew that that an individual was not free, and was being forced to, make BrightID connections, that I would not participate if I knew that that was the situation. And if I knew that that was the situation, I would try to inform other people that I thought that that was the situation. And so I would, yeah, just from a very basic level of even making a connection, I would just refuse to make a connection there. Because yeah, I think that's a violation of what BrightID is about. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I think Aura could detect like rings of, I guess you could say, like if there was a slavery ring or something like that going on, it could possibly be used to help detect something like that. Although, it's not for the purposes of BrightID, I would say, like detecting that for the purposes of BrightID. I mean, you should definitely also, if you're aware of something like that, of course, you report it to the authorities. But for the purposes of like not allowing those people to benefit from holding BrightID accounts in that manner, definitely also something like Aura could be used.
And I could also imagine information like that, or a lot of other information, again, where you don't necessarily want to publish it to the complete graph, but maybe you want to like just tell a certain node or certain selection of nodes that have this proven history of like they will, like, they'll do the right thing with this information. They'll pass it along in whatever the right ways. I don't know how to define that, in self-sovereign ways, but that it doesn't all get published, but it all uses related architecture.
I also I've thought about we've talked about heartbeats, and sourcing, not sourcing, but yeah, we've talked about heartbeats from the app, heartbeat activity from the app, but later on, the apps that use BrightID, if they could send heartbeats of activities, I think that could also make it difficult. That would allow us to have more nuanced scoring, so that it would be hard for somebody dictating a whole bunch of people and taking advantage of them to maintain those heartbeats. or something like that. So there could be something there. It would be similar to it would be cases like that would be something similar to somebody creating a Sybil account, right? A dictator just taking all the UBIs and taking control of all these accounts, BrightID accounts, or an abusive spouse doing that would have hard time maintaining the heartbeats.
Yeah, and while you were talking about that, I was also thinking about how trust gets put into portions of the graph, and how, like you were saying, like a dictator attack, how that resembles a Sybil attack. So if you think about how BrightID is seeded with trust right now, you have the founders, and then you have right now some BrightID stars that are trusted seed groups, and you have some other communities that are discoverable and auditable, that also have some seed capabilities. And then the trust flows out from there. So that if you have a region that's lacking those seed points, that looks like a Sybil region. And if you have a region that has seed points, then that looks like the real graph. And so imagine a dictatorship region. If like the norm is to say, okay, we think that that like these communities that have been audited by other communities, these are trustworthy communities. We know these communities that exist. We know people go there of their own free will. We know that this is like an open club where you can go and meet, talk to real people, and make some BrightID connections, and that's good. That's like a trustworthy community place, and so they deserve some seed power. But on the other hand, if you have something like where people are being marched into a place with barbed wire and like forced to make BrightID connections, then I think that fails the auditing process, and so that doesn't earn seed power. And so in that case, the dictator realm looks a lot like a Sybil realm. It just doesn't have that trust. And even if it's a government, even if it has like government authority, if we're seeding the graph with trust from people that are sharing e-passports from, let's say, Canada, and allowing that to be a way for people to like add a little trust in their corner of the graph that can then be spread about to the people that they connect to, and they can pull in from other people who've done the same. That you could say, well, we trust the government of Canada. Maybe we've audited their process for doing e-passports, and we trust that they're doing it correctly. But maybe Syria, we think that it's all a sham. That when they do their e-passports, they're basically holding a bunch of passports. They've maybe got a bunch of fake passports, and they're like, it's just, this is not a trustworthy system. So nodes in the BrightID system, they don't import that as trust, and so that doesn't become seeds. And so and I think that's like that like core part of BrightID, when done correctly and used in like a common sense way, the way that we're already doing it, I think that already helps to break down these type of like coerced parts of the graph. Yes.
I think so.
I'm sorry for putting the mood so heavy, but the thing is that if you are thinking right now how to solve that because you see that close, it's because BrightID is in the right path, right? Because it's from the goals you are aiming. So to change a little the thing, I would like to ask about another thing. Maybe you guys are thinking about you are talking about radical inclusion, right? So maybe do you guys think about that there is two kind of discrimination. There is a negative discrimination, but there is a positive discrimination. So there is a really heavy difference between equality and equity. How you think, or what are you thinking about that? There is some people that maybe need a little bit more, and people that don't need, not need the same. The people have different necessities. So how to make that differentiation in if everyone is in the same level? So someone is poor, someone is rich. Does it matter, or how you think about that?
I mean, from my perspective, I think again we push those issues to the edges. We push those to the applications to kind of figure that out. Like we just provide the ability to make to prove somebody is unique, and then and to prove that if somebody, or to get more information to see if somebody is trying to game the system. That is the base layer of what BrightID can provide. Anything outside of that is, from my perspective, down the line, or in the realm of what the apps will need to solve. To kind of touch back on what Bitsika was saying on the conversation that we're having about heartbeat checks. And for those that don't know, like a heartbeat check is like some sort of in-app action that will like keep your will indicate in the graph that you've used your account, and you've touched your account in some sort of way, and apps could then use that as a way to keep your account with them activated. The reason being, if you're a single person and you're trying to manage multiple Sybil accounts, that if you have to do a physical action every so often, it becomes exponentially harder for you to maintain all of those accounts. Either you need to be logging out and logging in to all your various BrightID accounts like all the time to see if you have to perform that action, or you have to have many different devices all logged into that account. And so I think when we talk about Sybil resistance, it's not binary. It's a spectrum where and security in terms of layers of an onion. We try to add more and more layers, and there's no like one iron wall, iron curtain layer that like, oh, this will never be broken. Like we just try and layer on more layers of security to make it more difficult. And so this adds a layer of difficulty where I guess if you're a nation state, you probably have the resources to have a bunch of phones and to hire, a few people to manage all of those phones. So it doesn't exactly address that issue, but for a single person with limited resources, it becomes very hard in order to manage many accounts. And I think with some of the apps that have been using BrightID, they're not too concerned about one person having a few Sybil accounts. Like, I mean, that's not ideal, but that's not the major issue. It's if one person has 100 accounts, 1,000 accounts, 10,000 accounts, that's when it becomes like an overswaying, what's it called, unfair advantage. But the more we can limit that, the better. And so I think like implementing like a heartbeat kind of thing, it maintains the level of radical inclusion that we want to go for, but it moves toward excluding those that would be malicious users of BrightID.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because I don't want BrightID itself to make any distinctions between people for any reason whatsoever. It makes sense to me that BrightID itself is just a provider of unique accounts, identifying people, and keeping the bots and Sybils out, and that's it. That's the only purpose of BrightID. But on top of that, what applications require or what filters applications want to use, that would be a different the thing and is not a BrightID task to do. I don't want, like, I'm afraid of a future where people are banned from being considered a human for any reason, because you can't draw the line. But how do you distinguish that this person is like, I don't know, harmful to others or a terrorist or whatever? Because then you have to define that line, and defining that line is so difficult. And then, like, in my mind, if a person is even like a, I don't know, a murderer, it's still a person. You can't say that, okay, this person is not a person anymore, he's not a human anymore, because he has done or she has done a horrible thing. But yeah, these filters, I agree with Joran. These should be filters that like are done by applications, and people are free to use this application or not. But BrightID itself, in its essence, you're a human, you're alive, this is your BrightID account.
Yeah, I hope that there's, I mean, I am rooting for identity wallets. Like I hope that everybody gets to choose an identity wallet that they really like. And I hope that in their identity wallet, they'll have some BrightID certifications that just say, hey, I'm unique to the level that this app wants. And they'll have a bunch of those. And then they'll also have certifications that they can share in a privacy preserving way that say things like, I've never committed murder. I'm 18 years old, whatever the case may be, whatever it is that they need, that the app requires, they can share that.
Yeah. I think we're almost up to the time. I wonder if there's anything anyone wants to ask before we conclude this session. We can obviously continue this conversation in the next week if people are interested. But for now, is there anything that anyone wants to mention before we conclude the session? Cool. So yeah, I want to thank you. This is a conversation that we can continue and think about, and Adam said that it keeps him awake some nights, just talking like and thinking about some of the points that we made and we discussed today.
But I
But
feel better after talking with all of you, so thank you. I feel
thank
more
you
at
for,
ease now.
yeah. I know it's like a something that is like your third kid. I know you have two sons. This is your third one. But yeah, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you everyone for coming to the community call and listening and participating in this conversation. I'm just gonna stop recording in a couple of seconds so we can start a group connection together. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And